Hey guys, tonight we're curling up with one of the driest, and weirdly most fragrant, stories history has to offer. You're standing at the edge of the Persian Empire, right where the sun slinks low behind sandstone cliffs, casting long shadows across a dust-choked road that never seems to end. Camels groan softly, stamping their feet in the sand, while messengers in linen robes stretch their backs and wait for the signal to move. In the fading heat, the air carries faint whiffs of crushed sandalwood, warmed ambergris, and the earthy tang of something floral you can't quite place. And this is a postal stop. Yes, you heard that right. Before inboxes and barcodes, there were post stations with incense braziers and perfume blends, part of a vast delivery network dreamed up by kings and scented for function. The Persian postal system wasn't just a bunch of guys on horses, it was a state-run, route-controlled, sometimes extravagantly aromatic operation. You're about to be dragged gently, sandal by sandal, through 2 hours of dusty couriers, fragrant scrolls, and more ancient bureaucracy than your sleep-deprived brain could ever request. You probably won't survive this. And honestly, that's the point. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your weight on the uneven flagstones, trying not to sneeze as the scent of frankincense wafts past. The air is thick, like someone spilled a whole perfumery into the desert. This is not just a cultural flourish, it's policy. Scent plays a role here, not a decorative one, but an embedded, logistical one. You watch a courier approach a brazier and wave a scroll through the aromatic smoke. Is he purifying it, marking it, masking something more human? Your guide tonight is a grizzled man with a voice like gravel soaked in honey. He's got sandalwood oil smeared across his beard, and his camel smells faintly of cloves. You follow him down the stone path, watching as other couriers organize bundles of leather-wrapped messages. You spot a few wax-sealed scrolls dangling from saddle hooks, each tagged with a thin ribbon dyed in rich colors, perhaps coded to route, urgency, or origin. Historians still argue whether the Persian Empire used perfume deliberately in mail handling, or whether it was a side effect of trade goods rubbing off along the way. But the consistency of record suggests it wasn't just accidental. Herodotus, the Greek historian who was either a genius or a gossip columnist depending on who you ask, wrote that Persian couriers moved, neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night would stop them. What he didn't mention is that many of them probably smelled like an apothecary exploded. The Achaemenid Empire, stretching across 3 continents in the 5th century BCE, needed a system to move messages fast, and those messages weren't dry parchment alone. Scrolls were known to be waxed, oiled, or wrapped in perfumed cloth, likely for preservation, but perhaps also for communication. You see, in a world without tracking numbers or IDs, smell might have served as a subtle signature. A faint trace of saffron might whisper, "This is from the palace." A burst of mint, maybe from a military outpost. And then there's the very human part. Couriers rode for hours, sometimes days, through punishing terrain. They shared bunks, rarely bathed, and probably didn't smell like fresh linen. If the palace wanted a scroll to arrive without the pungent scent of man and camel stew, it makes sense someone decided to dabble in perfume, at least once. You run your fingers over a scroll handed to you by your guide. The surface is oily, something like cedarwood mixed with myrrh, and warm from the desert heat. He gestures toward a nearby rock basin filled with crushed herbs and an oily liquid. Rahati, he mutters, comfort, perhaps, or freshness. You dip your finger in and instantly regret it. Too strong. Your nose tingles. Somewhere in that mix is something sweet, something sharp, and something that smells suspiciously like someone dropped a cinnamon bun in a tar pit. But here's where the story gets even more ridiculous. The postal stations, like this one, weren't just stops. They were carefully placed nodes in a vast relay system called the Angarium. Each stop was staffed, stocked, and scented. Riders would swap exhausted horses for fresh ones, grab water, maybe bless their messages in smoke, and move on. Some messages traveled up to 150 miles per day. You try to imagine FedEx doing that, with rose petals. The older courier points to the horizon and chuckles. You're not sure what he said, but you get the sense he's been through this dance too many times to care. He hands you a small pouch. Inside are crushed rose petals, a tiny stick of resin, and a cloth, pre-scented. It seems, for your letter, he says. You weren't planning on sending one. But hey, when in Persia. A fringe theory floats among some scholars, probably the kind who spend a bit too long sniffing old paper, that Persian scrolls were matched to perfume blends the same way we'd match handwriting or wax stamps. Specific oils for specific regions or royal branches. Maybe even scent-based encryption. Change the scent. Change the meaning. No proof, of course. Just tantalizing hints in administrative records that mention aromatic marks or preserved odors. You lean against the warm stone wall and let your eyes drift shut. The scent of sandalwood still floats lazily in the air, mixing with the desert wind. A camel snorts. Somewhere, a scroll is dipped in oil and tied shut with precision. All of it, wrapped in this quiet routine of empire-wide communication, and subtle, sneaky luxury. You're only at the beginning, just one station in hundreds. But already, the blend of bureaucracy and beauty is oddly soothing. Maybe it's the scent, maybe it's the rhythm of the road, or maybe it's just you, dozing off in a place where mail always moves. And everything smells faintly intentional. You're still standing near the edge of the station, eyes half-lidded, as your guide flicks the reins of his camel and starts walking. You fall in step beside him, your sandals scuffing the ground with a lazy rhythm. It's getting cooler now. Desert evenings are like that. One moment your sweat is evaporating in waves, and the next, your teeth are thinking about chattering. But the scent lingers. Smoke and something citrusy, like lemon balm dried in the sun. The Persian postal system, known as the Chapa Khana, isn't just a clever arrangement of roadways. It's a display of control, of absolute, centralized power. These messages aren't gossip or love notes, though perhaps a few sneaky ones slip through. They're commands, proclamations, maybe even condemnations. The kind of thing that needs to move fast and arrive untouched. And scent becomes part of the performance. You glance at a passing courier, a young man with a pouch tied at his hip. As he walks, the flap lifts slightly, and you catch a whiff of vetiver and musk. He doesn't even notice. The scent is baked into his uniform, possibly the result of pre-treated cloth or a ritualized oiling process before departure. Either way, it's not a personal fragrance. It belongs to the system. The Persians weren't the first to use messengers, obviously, but they were probably the first to industrialize it at scale. Postal stations every 25 to 30 miles. All maintained by state workers. A rider could deliver a scroll from the heart of Persia to a frontier province faster than you'd think, 2 or 3 days. Depending on terrain. But here's the boring yet weirdly fascinating bit. Officials made sure these messages arrived with an unmistakable flair. Not just urgency, elegance. Think of it like putting a crown emoji on your email signature. But with cinnamon oil. It's not hard to imagine a courtier unfurling a scroll and catching the subtle scent of saffron. He wouldn't need to read the seal to know, this was from the king. The great king. If we're being precise, scent wasn't just an indulgence, it was part of the branding. After all, how do you remind your subjects that you are everywhere? All the time, you make sure even your letters carry your signature scent. And the ingredients? Oh, you're not getting synthetic rose and budget lavender here. We're talking high-end materials, resins from Arabia. cinnamon bark from India, rosewater distilled in giant copper kettles, and oils extracted from wild-growing herbs native to Persia's mountain regions. A royal postal scroll might have cost more in perfume than in parchment. But that was the point. Here's a fringe tidbit you weren't expecting. Some archaeologists think small clay scent vials have been found buried alongside dispatch chests, not because the couriers were sentimental, but because they needed to refresh a scroll mid-journey. Sort of like reapplying cologne after a 12-hour flight. You start picturing a poor rider halfway through the Zagros Mountains, pausing to dab a scroll with pine oil so it doesn't smell like, well, horse. Historians still argue whether these perfumed practices were truly widespread or just limited to elite correspondence. Some say the idea of standardized fragrance is too modern, too logistically complex, but others point to surviving texts that refer to message incense and aromatic cloths, implying that at least someone was making scrolls smell nice on purpose. You pass another courier headed the opposite direction. His horse trots steadily, and he nods in your direction without slowing. On his belt, a tiny wax-sealed pouch, maybe a message, maybe a vial of oil. Either way, the smell of juniper lingers behind him like a trail. Your guide chuckles. Military, he mutters, tapping his nose. They like bitter smells, keeps you awake. And that's another layer. The scents weren't just symbolic. Some were practical, stimulating oils to keep couriers alert, calming herbs to reduce stress on long rides, lavender for nerves, citrus for focus. You're basically watching the ancient Persian version of an essential oil pyramid scheme. Except it actually worked. You approach another post station, this one smaller and more rustic. A few woven mats line the ground, and clay pots sit near a low fire. A young girl stirs something in one of the pots, releasing a plume of smoke that smells like sage and pine. She glances up, then back down at her task, unbothered. For her, this is just how messages are prepped. She's probably never touched a letter that didn't smell faintly of a garden. You sit on a stone ledge nearby, letting the scene drift in and out of your consciousness. Somewhere behind you, a camel groans. A courier jokes with a stable boy. The scent of the pot shifts, now more cinnamon, maybe a hint of fennel. You wonder if they're blending it for a message to the northern provinces. Those letters, your guide says, need to arrive not only fast, but fragrant enough to make a chilly reception slightly warmer. You think about modern mail, cardboard boxes, plastic envelopes, rubber bands, and it feels sterile in comparison. In Persia, the act of sending a letter was, in itself, a ceremony. You didn't just write something down and toss it to the wind. You infused it, literally, with intent. Even the act of burning incense while sealing a letter may have had symbolic meaning. The smoke could carry prayers, cleanse the message, or even create an olfactory timestamp. As in, this scroll passed through Station X where the scent blend is always mint, saffron, and juniper. It's like sniffing a passport stamp. You yawn, not from boredom, but from the warmth. The rhythm, the gentle pulse of a system that ran smoothly long before Wi-Fi was a twinkle in some engineer's eye. You stretch your legs and press your hands against the cool stone behind you. Overhead, the stars are beginning to peek out, one by one, like cautious couriers checking for a signal. The night has its own scent now, cooler, crisper, a little sharper, as desert air tends to get. You breathe in and catch a faint aroma from the brazier. This one, definitely clove, maybe a bit of rosemary, and if you're not mistaken, the tiniest touch of something sweet, perhaps from a date pressed too close to a scroll. This was perfume not for romance, but for rule, a kingdom that stretched across lands and languages, stitched together by roads and riders, and the faintest echo of rosewater. Riding the wind. The stars are out in force now, scattered across the velvet sky like silver ink flecks spilled from a careless scribe's brush. You're lying on your back near the post station, your guide somewhere nearby, chewing quietly on a dried fig and humming to himself. The warm scent of oil still clings to your sleeves. Not quite enough to overpower the musky camel who's decided to snooze a little too close to your head, but enough. The Chapa Khana system doesn't sleep. Not really. Even in the stillness of night. There are murmurs. A rider adjusting his saddle. A brazier being refilled. The soft crackle of fire as another incense blend is stirred. The station operates like clockwork, Persian clockwork. Which means it's laced with rituals and slightly more sandalwood than seems practical. You sit up and gaze at a wooden chest being unlatched by 2 station assistants. Inside are scrolls, each wrapped tightly, marked with seals, and, each tucked with a small cloth pouch, possibly containing dried herbs or resin fragments. You lean a little closer. The assistants don't seem to mind. One scroll has a thin smear of something pale on its edge. You sniff, cautiously, jasmine, subtle, like someone barely whispered it into the parchment. And here's a weird little fringe fact for you. Some Persian scrolls may have had scent not just on the outside, but between the layers. Imagine writing a royal decree, rolling it up, and sprinkling a fine layer of powdered rose or cinnamon inside. Like a pastry. Was it to protect from insects? To flatter the recipient? To mark importance? Historians still argue whether this was standard procedure or just the over-the-top habit of one particularly dramatic essay trap. As you trail behind a courier preparing for a night ride, you start to notice other patterns. Horses are brushed with herbal oil blends, part bug repellent, part calming agent, part probably just tradition. Saddles have faint traces of cedar. Even the water containers smell faintly lemony, possibly cleaned with citrus peels. It's like someone was determined to fight body odor with a full-on aromatherapy offensive. Your guide slaps the side of a horse, and the poor thing gives you a look that says, "Yes, I smell better than you. Fair." You leave the station with him, heading down a dusty slope toward the next leg of the journey. The road is dim but walkable, and the sky above lights the path with an eerie, silvery glow. Out here, the scent doesn't fade, it travels. A passing breeze carries hints of whatever mixture is burning at the last station. Lavender this time, no, something more peppery, basil. The Persians believed in networks, human, spiritual, and logistical. The mail system, though secular on the surface, was a kind of lifeline for the divine right of kings. Orders had to travel faster than rebellion. Edicts had to outrun gossip. And loyalty had to arrive perfumed and unbroken. They didn't have encryption algorithms. But they had myrrh and musk. And those went a long way. You pass a waymarker stone, etched with cuneiforms so worn by time that you can barely make out the lines. A bird cries overhead. Somewhere in the dark, a camel grumbles like it's telling the sky to go back to sleep. You smile at the ridiculousness of it all. You're walking through ancient postal routes sniffing imaginary parchment. It's absurd. It's delightful. It's history. And speaking of absurd, let's talk about the royal couriers. These weren't your average messengers. These were elite riders, some say specially bred for endurance. Others argue they were picked based on loyalty and nasal strength. Okay. That part might be an exaggeration. Still, the system was strict. Each rider traveled only one segment of the route, handing off the message at every station. That meant the scroll might pass through 10, 15 hands, all of them responsible for preserving its contents and its bouquet. Some speculate that riders were trained to recognize scent as part of their duties. If a scroll arrived smelling off, it might signal tampering, or just a sweaty horse. But let's be romantic about it. Your guide suddenly pauses and gestures toward a rock alcove up ahead. Nestled inside is what looks like a miniature shrine, just a few stones stacked around a bowl of smoldering herbs. A postal blessing spot, maybe. No signs, no priests, just the scent of thyme and honeygrass curling into the night. He nods once. For safe travels, he says. You toss a tiny piece of bark into the bowl and watch it spark. Is it nonsense? Possibly, But it feels right. The night is cooler now. And the smells sharper. You wonder if letters carried at night picked up more scent than those riding during the hot day. Another pointless but pleasant thought to lull your brain into submission. Back in the day, Persian administrators kept records, extensive ones. Some included notes like "message left at station D" or "courier delayed due to bandit activity near the gorge." But once in a while, there's a curious annotation: "Scroll returned due to foul odor." No explanation, just that. Imagine that. A multi-day journey rejected because someone forgot to sprinkle the right resin. You trudge past a dry creek bed, your feet crunching on brittle reeds. The air shifts again, and now it smells like mint and scorched wood, a sign that a station is nearby, or that someone made tea and fell asleep halfway through. And now here's a rare scholarly whisper. There's speculation that certain scents were tied not only to places but to intent. Diplomatic messages might be carried with sweet florals. Military dispatches, bitter herbs or resins. Religious notices, something light and smoky, like frankincense. It wasn't codified, of course, but if enough couriers believed it, then the practice becomes self-fulfilling, a form of scent-based etiquette. Centuries before scented stationery became a thing. You finally crest a ridge and see it, another post station. This one more fortified. A few guards sit near the gate, oil lamps casting golden halos around them. A pot bubbles on a fire. Something smells like cumin and oranges. Not your standard perfume profile, but still oddly welcoming. As you approach, a guard raises an eyebrow, then shrugs and waves you in. He points to a stack of scrolls drying on a flat slab of stone. You walk over. The air above them is heavy with oil. Some of the scrolls shimmer faintly, like they've been polished. You pick one up, carefully, and catch a blend of patchouli, pine, and something you can't name. It's pleasant, unexpected, and totally unnecessary for the message inside, which is probably about grain quotas or tax audits. But again, that's the point. Scent wasn't added for need. It was added for meaning. You sit down near the fire, listening to the quiet clink of armor and the soft slosh of tea being poured. Someone hands you a cup. It's warm, sweet, and tastes faintly like chamomile and something woodsy. The same things used to line scrolls. Possibly. The station settles into its nighttime rhythm, and you settle with it, surrounded by the quiet hum of history and the lingering perfume of a postal system that wanted you to smell its power as much as read it. You're dozing now, somewhere between awake and dreaming, when the unmistakable scent of frankincense nudges you back into the moment. It swirls up from the coals beside you, mingling with the sharper edge of cedarwood and a dusty leather note that's either from your guide's boots or the scroll pouches stacked near your head. It's hard to tell anymore. A soft clatter pulls your attention. One of the station workers, barefoot, nimble, clearly too awake for this hour, unrolls a fresh batch of message parchment. She places each sheet beside a tiny ceramic bowl, into which she drops 3 resin pearls. The resins don't melt, they just sit, slowly releasing their scent like reluctant ghosts. You watch with half-closed eyes as she lifts one parchment and waves it gently above the bowl. A ritual, a sealant, a habit born from centuries of aromatic bureaucracy. There's something meditative about it, the way scent and scroll and hand movement blur together. She moves without hesitation, as though the smell is telling her exactly when the paper is ready. The scent is strong, too strong for just aesthetic pleasure. It's about preservation. That's your hunch, anyway. And here's the mainstream historical bit you've probably been waiting for. Persian postal stations didn't just exist under Darius the Great, they were perfected under him. The Royal Road, which connected Sardis in the west to Susa in the east, ran over 1.600 miles. And every 20 miles or so, another post station like this one, stocked with horses, food, scrolls, and probably enough rosemary oil to stun a goat. Herodotus, the famously dramatic Greek historian, claimed that neither snow nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers. Sound familiar? Yep, the US Postal Service kinda borrowed that vibe. But you didn't tune in for the usual facts. So here's the fringe flavor. There are odd, poorly translated records suggesting that some messages were sent dated. As in, each day of the week had a corresponding blend. A Tuesday might mean rose and ash. A Thursday, pine and cardamom. This way, even if a scroll got damaged or the seal broke, a courier or administrator might still guess when it was sent, based on its smell. Of course, historians still argue whether this is legitimate calendrical scent coding or just a poetic flourish someone added to a royal memoir after drinking too much date wine. Either way, you're now thinking about scent-based timestamps and realizing we've definitely regressed. Your phone doesn't smell like vanilla or lemongrass. It just smells like regret and fingerprints. You yawn again, stretching your arms until your back gives a small, satisfying pop. The guard nearest you chuckles and gestures toward a bundle of fabric by the wall. You crawl over, slowly, and find it surprisingly soft. Probably goat wool, maybe horsehair. Either way, it smells faintly like old smoke and something sweet, like dried figs. You lie down and stare at the ceiling, which is less a ceiling and more a sagging cloth held up by wooden poles. Above your head, wind nudges the edges of the tent. And outside, the sound of a rider preparing for departure adds a low rhythm to the quiet. Saddle creaks, a whispered farewell, the soft thunk of a scroll being tucked into a satchel. You know that satchel's been perfumed. You can smell it from here, something clean and grassy. Basil, maybe, or green mandrake. Another curious note floats into your mind. There are unconfirmed but intriguing fragments from Babylonian medical texts that speak of carriers of message and fragrance, described in terms suspiciously similar to Persian postal couriers. Which raises the question, did Persian couriers double as primitive aromatherapists? Or were the Babylonians just giving poetic names to messengers who smelled better than average? Either way, it's a thought worth chewing on, like a sprig of dried mint stuck between your teeth. The post station dims, one lantern snuffed at a time, until only the coals remain, glowing gently, releasing the last bits of cedar and sage. And now the silence feels intentional, like the station itself is taking a long, slow breath. Your mind drifts to what the scrolls actually said. Orders, of course, maybe requests for tribute, news from the coast, weather reports, occasionally, perhaps, a warning about bandits or a sudden tax hike. But what if, just occasionally, someone snuck in something personal? A poem, a prayer, a single line of longing folded between layers of official decree. It's easy to imagine a noblewoman slipping a scroll into a courier's pouch with a whisper, "Don't read it. But make sure it smells like home." And then the courier, following some unspoken code, dabs the edge of the scroll with saffron oil and tucks it beneath the king's own messages, knowing full well he'll get in trouble if caught. But still doing it, because scent travels where speech cannot. You roll onto your side, your hand brushing a stray scroll case. It's warm, someone must have just placed it there. You lift it, gently, and catch a scent you haven't smelled before tonight, orange blossom. Sharp, sweet, like fresh wind in a stone courtyard. It's not a scent you'd expect here in the middle of the desert. Which means it's meant for somewhere far away. Somewhere coastal, maybe a border region where the trees bloom in winter and the king's influence feels more like rumor than rule. You imagine the scroll arriving days later, unfurled by hands rough from work, eyes squinting against salt winds. And as the words are read, the scent rises, a reminder, not just of Persia, but of attention, of precision, of care. That's the part that stays with you. The idea that scent, so ephemeral, so easy to overlook, was deliberately woven into the machinery of empire. As important as wax seals and royal signatures, a kind of invisible ink, read not by eyes but by memory. Outside, the wind shifts. You smell it before you hear it. A new fire being kindled. Cinnamon bark this time, a blend used, your guide once said, for messages to the eastern provinces. People out there prefer stronger spices. Or so the stereotype goes. You fall asleep to the scent of cinnamon and smoke. The parchment pressed gently against your hand. The whisper of another courier's footsteps padding away into the night. Somewhere down the line, that message will arrive on a clean slab of stone, and someone important, or maybe not, will unroll it, sniff, and think, "Ah, the king remembers me." You wake up to a faint jingling, like someone shaking a pouch of coins far too early in the morning. You crack one eye open and see your guide standing over you with an annoyingly chipper expression, holding what looks like a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. He tosses it down beside your bedroll with a smirk and says, "For your smell, charming." The morning air is cool and carries the scent of ash and clove. Someone's already rekindled the fire, and a new pot of resin is bubbling quietly nearby. The scent is different now, earthier, darker, something like burnt honey and thyme. You sit up slowly, brushing dust off your tunic, and realize that even your blanket smells faintly floral. You've become part of the system now, a walking sachet. As you prepare to move on, you watch a courier receiving final instructions. He bows, accepts a scroll, lightly perfumed with sage and chamomile, and tucks it into his belt pouch. Before he mounts, the station master steps forward with a small cloth, dabs it into an oil vial, and runs it lightly over the horse's chest strap. Another layer of the ritual complete. The scent trail continues, even on horseback. You head out with your guide, feet crunching over gravel as the day stretches before you. The sun starts to peek through scattered clouds, revealing an endless road ahead. You squint at a thin line of stone markers leading toward the horizon. These are more than just waypoints. They're the bones of the royal road, still holding up after centuries. Each one, in theory, meant to direct and encourage the tireless post riders. You, of course, are moving significantly slower, because your sandals weren't designed by Persian engineers, and also because you're still chewing the world's driest apricot. Now, here's a fascinating historical tidbit to chew on instead. The Royal Road was not just for imperial correspondence. It also served merchants, pilgrims, and, believe it or not, early perfume traders. These vendors traveled along the same route, stopping at post stations, often trading resin, oil, and exotic dried flora. Some speculate that this is how the idea of perfumed messages even began. Couriers exposed to the wares of spice merchants who convinced them to dab a bit of luxury into their leather pouches. Historians still argue whether this merging of scent and scroll was a top-down innovation from the royal court or an organic development from trade mingling with administration. But it's easy to imagine a weary courier being handed a vial of lavender oil with a grin and a wink. "Try this. Makes the ride go faster." You doubt that last part. But hey, placebos are powerful. You pass another small post station. This one barely more than a stable and a shack. A rider waits outside, his horse stomping impatiently. He holds a scroll tight in his hand, as if afraid it'll fly off with the breeze. You pause as your guide chats briefly with the station keeper. Something about the scent blend used today. They've gone with bitter orange and cinnamon bark. Eastern route, the keeper mutters. Hard terrain, keeps the scrolls from spoiling. You raise an eyebrow at that. Spoiling, like fruit? Turns out, ancient scrolls weren't just vulnerable to wear and tear, they attracted pests. Mice, insects, mold. So some perfuming was as much about preservation as presentation. Resins like myrrh and frankincense had antimicrobial properties. Lavender repelled moths. Peppermint, excellent against ants. Apparently, you wonder if modern libraries know this, or if they're still spraying aerosol and praying. As you continue walking, the road narrows and begins to rise. You follow a gentle incline, past scattered shrubs and thorny bushes, until the wind picks up, brushing past you with a soft, warm current. It smells like sage and salt. Somewhere nearby, someone's burning resin again, probably to bless another departure. You pause for a moment and think about this whole infrastructure. At its peak, the Persian Empire stretched from modern-day Turkey to parts of India. That's massive, and all of it had to stay connected, messages zipping back and forth like nervous system signals through veins of dust and stone. That alone would have been a logistical nightmare. Now imagine adding scent management to the mix. Yet there are signs it was done with remarkable consistency. Clay tablets from the administrative archives mention fragrant scroll pouches, herb-lined cases, and even specific complaints from scribes about inferior oils being substituted. One record dryly notes, "Scroll stank. Rejected. No follow-up." Just that. Bureaucracy at its finest. You climb a bit higher, the rocks beneath your feet now smelling faintly of heat and time. Or maybe that's just your imagination. Either way, it's comforting. The trail bends, and you stop for a drink. Your guide uncorks a water skin, and even the water smells like mint. He grins at your expression. Rinse with mint sprig, makes it taste alive. You swish it around. Not bad. You sit under the shade of a short, gnarly tree, probably older than half the buildings in your hometown, and look out over the expanse below. Far in the distance, you can just barely make out the next post station, a tiny square of smoke, stone, and movement. The idea that someone out there is already preparing a scroll, lighting the incense, and sending a message along this same road makes the empire feel suddenly intimate. Like a very large family trying desperately to keep in touch, one scented scroll at a time. And now, for your weird tidbit of the day, some scholars believe certain high-ranking couriers were trained in olfactory recall, that is, memorizing specific scent blends and associating them with certain senders or messages. Almost like a nose-based signature. You sniff and think about your own associations. Vanilla means birthdays, lemon means cleaning day, so maybe it's not so strange after all. Your guide taps your shoulder. Time to move. You brush dirt from your hands and begin the descent into the next valley. The scent changes again, something musky, sharp, definitely animal-based. Musk or civet. Maybe it's from that caravan that passed earlier. The road isn't just royal anymore. Merchants, families, and nomads all travel it, mixing their aromas together into something uniquely Persian, wild, curated, messy, and surprisingly organized. As the sun reaches its peak, you pass a cluster of travelers. One of them offers you a sweet dipped in what smells like rosewater and nutmeg. You accept, bite down, and immediately feel like you've licked a flower. Delicious, slightly unsettling. Welcome to the Achaemenid Empire. And as you walk the final stretch into the next station, tired, sun-warmed, and very faintly sticky, you realize something simple and strange. The smell of history isn't musty books or cold museums. It's jasmine and smoke, leather and sweat, myrrh and memory. The next station appears like a mirage, flat-roofed, half-melted into the sand, with smoke curling gently from a squat chimney. You reach it just as the sun begins its slow decline, casting long golden streaks across the packed earth. The station isn't grand, but it's busy, 2 couriers dismounting, 1 horse being rubbed down, and a scribe furiously waving a feather fan over a drying scroll. You blink at that. The scroll isn't drying from ink. It's drying from oil. You wander closer, pretending to adjust your sash while really just being nosy. The scribe dips a cloth into a shallow ceramic bowl filled with a viscous, yellowish substance. He carefully dabs the edge of a scroll, working in small circles. The scent hits you a moment later, lemon balm and sweet anise. Fresh, sharp, and oddly comforting. Your guide sidles up and mutters, "Northern blend," keeps the paper from curling in the humidity. You arch a brow. Humidity? In Persia? But then you remember, this empire stretches far beyond the deserts. Some of the provinces near the Caspian Sea are downright swampy by comparison. So yes, humidity, and curling scrolls. and, apparently, a lemon balm solution to fight the fight. As you sit on a flat stone by the entrance, watching the dance of hands and herbs, a small boy scurries by carrying 2 scroll pouches. He's muttering to himself, sniffing each pouch in turn. Cedar, mint, wrong one. He drops one, scampers back to the scribe, and gets a new scroll. No labels, just scent. You're watching a real-time filing system based entirely on olfaction. Suddenly your digital folders feel embarrassingly primitive. Here's your mainstream historical anchor. Persian administrative systems were among the most advanced of the ancient world. They used cuneiform tablets, parchment scrolls, seals, and signature stamps, but recent archaeological digs have uncovered tiny perforated boxes, basically ancient scent diffusers, found near scroll storage sites. Historians used to think they were decorative. Now, they're rethinking things. Maybe scent wasn't just nice to have. Maybe it was the key to the entire organization system. Still, historians debate whether these scent diffusers were used to distinguish messages by region, by urgency, or even by content. Was rose used for domestic news? Was cardamom a sign of military reports? No one agrees. Some even scoff at the theory, claiming the scents were purely for preservation or luxury. But when you see a 10-year-old filing scrolls by sniffing, you start leaning toward the functional olfactory coding camp. You peek into the scroll room, a surprisingly cool chamber carved into the rock. Dozens of pouches hang from wooden beams, each sealed with twine. The air smells like a botanical experiment gone rogue. Layers of lavender, juniper, saffron, patchouli, and something that reminds you faintly of roasted garlic. Probably not intentional. The room hums with age and purpose. Outside, your guide chats with a courier who's preparing to ride. He gestures for you to come over. The courier, tall, dusty, with the haunted eyes of someone who's galloped across 3 provinces, nods and lifts his pouch. Smell, he says. You hesitate, then lean in. The pouch smells like violet and ash. It's gentle, floral, but with an undercurrent of fire. Rebellion, the courier says flatly. Report from the mountain provinces. Bandits. You glance at your guide. He shrugs. Some blends aren't for beauty. They're warnings. And now you know, sometimes, scent wasn't just for sorting or scent tracking, it was code. Violet and ash meant danger. Frankincense with bloodroot meant a death in the court. Lemon with crushed olive meant victory in a border conflict. Or so the rumors go. You're starting to see the invisible language that stretched across this empire, not written in ink, but inhaled in layers. You sit quietly as the courier mounts and rides out. His horse kicks up dust, and with it, the faintest trace of rosewood, a detail left behind, maybe for the next rider, maybe for you. There's another scroll pouch lying nearby, unclaimed. You pick it up gently. It smells like camphor and mint. Sharp, medicinal, definitely not ceremonial. Your guide grins and says, "That's for the SA trap in Ekbatana." He has a cough, doesn't like heavy perfumes. You blink. That's oddly considerate for an empire. But then again, if your message is going hundreds of miles, you might as well make it breathable. The station keeper lights a small burner as the sun dips lower. He sprinkles crushed herbs into the flame. Instantly, the air shifts. Rosemary and myrtle drift up into the rafters. The station smells like a monastery now, clean and quiet. Time slows. A young girl arrives from a side path, clutching a sealed pouch to her chest. She waits patiently by the entrance, her eyes wide. No one speaks to her, but the station master takes the pouch, sniffs it once, ginger and beeswax, then nods. It disappears into a storage shelf. You get the sense that this happens every day. Scrolls arriving by children, by elders, by strangers. Some messages are royal, some are probably recipes. All of them, treated with equal ceremony. That's what holds an empire together, not just power, but structure, even the scented kind. Quirky detail for the road. There's one account, found in the writings of a Greek merchant, that claims Persian couriers sometimes chewed aromatic resins during their rides, not just for energy, but so their breath would leave a trail. This might be nonsense, or it might be the weirdest tracking method in postal history. Imagine someone sniffing the air and going, "Yep, Dariush passed this way, smells like cinnamon and self-importance." The stars begin to blink into view as night settles. You lie on a thin mat near the stable, listening to the horses shift in their sleep. One lets out a breathy snort that smells faintly, yes, faintly, of rosemary. Someone's been pampering their steed. You drift off wondering if any other empire ever took its mail so seriously. Not just the content, but the presentation, the emotion, the experience of reading something through your nose. And as your dreams start to pull you under, one last thought clings to the edge of consciousness. In ancient Persia, a letter wasn't just delivered. It arrived. You wake up to the sound of horses being saddled and morning incense being lit. Again, at this point, your sinuses are basically museum exhibits. Here we have the nasal cavities of someone who inhaled 6 regions worth of botanical history. You sit up, stretch, and find that your sleeping mat has absorbed the scent of saffron and pine from the nearby burner. You're starting to smell like a high-end spice merchant. Not the worst fate. Breakfast is flatbread and dried dates. Again, and you're beginning to think the ancient Persian postal system had more consistency than a modern chain restaurant. As you chew mechanically, your guide explains the plan. Today, you're detouring to a larger node of the postal network, one of the major distribution hubs. Lots of horses, lots of scrolls, and lots of noses, he adds with a grin. The path curves through hills covered in scrappy vegetation, patches of thyme and dusty wildflowers brushing against your legs. Every so often, a light breeze carries the telltale perfume of civilization ahead. You'd think the scent of a post station would be indistinguishable from all the herbs you've passed, but you'd be wrong. A real station has layers. There's the base, warm leather and oil. The mid-notes, wood smoke and incense. And then the kicker, whatever signature scent they're diffusing that week. It hits you long before the station comes into view. This time, it's sandalwood and orange blossom. Sweet, clean, almost luxurious. When the station finally appears, a modest complex of buildings encircled by low walls, you realize this isn't just a post outpost. It's a full-blown operation. Couriers come and go, some mounted, others on foot, all of them moving with urgency. You see stable boys washing down horses, their buckets infused with mint and thyme. Even the horses get the aromatic treatment. One older mare wears a necklace of dried flowers. Not for beauty, for morale. Apparently, she's been known to refuse to run without her daily dose of marjoram. Diva. Inside, the scent is even stronger. Scrolls are stacked on wide wooden shelves, arranged not alphabetically, not even by region, but by fragrance profile. Each row carries its own personality. There's a spiced section, cinnamon, clove, pepper, a floral aisle, rose, violet, iris, and a medicinal zone that smells like your grandmother's cold remedy cabinet. One worker, a stern woman with eyebrows that could slice bread, guides you through the shelves. She explains that couriers are trained to identify scent combinations as shorthand. A scroll that smells like sandalwood and cedar. That's an administrative order. Add a hint of saffron. It's a financial record. Swap in rose and cardamom. Personal letter. Throw in myrrh and honey. Royal edict. Burn before reading. Probably. Mainstream historical fact time. The Achaemenid Empire. Under Darius I organized its communication system so well that messages could travel nearly 1.70 miles across the empire in 7 to 9 days, a feat that made Herodotus lose his sandals with excitement. These message relays operated with military precision. Riders were given fresh mounts at each station, and at certain hubs like this one, Messages were sorted, redirected, and even copied by professional scribes. But here's the debate. Some historians argue whether fragrance coding was an official system or a localized practice that only evolved in certain regions. The scroll shelf manager here clearly thinks otherwise. "We've done this since my grandmother's grandmother," she says, arms folded, daring anyone to question her olfactory legacy. Your guide pulls you aside and introduces you to someone called the blendmaster. You are immediately interested. The blendmaster is a squat man with stained fingers and a nose like a hawk's beak. He works in a shaded side room, surrounded by rows of vials, herbs, cloth strips, and what appears to be a mortar large enough to crush a watermelon. Every scroll, he says proudly, gets a story. He pulls out a blank scroll, smears a thin line of honey on its edges, then waves a muslin cloth over it, one pre-infused with violet and laurel. "This one's for a marriage proposal," he explains. Goes to Sousa. You can't help it, you grin. Scented love letters, romantic and hygienic. And now for the quirky tidbit, one scroll, tucked away in a private compartment, carries a fragrance of pine, salt, and something that makes your eyes water. "What is that?" you ask. The blendmaster smirks. "Message from the army," he says. "Sent during a border siege. Had to mask the smell of blood and rot." You slowly lower the pouch and reconsider your career options. After a morning spent observing the sorting system, you're handed a training scroll. It's a blank message, used by apprentice couriers to practice scent recognition. Yours smells of basil and black tea, clearly a regional report from somewhere in the northeast. Your task: deliver it to the outer station 3 miles down the road. You are now, officially, part of the Empire's messaging machine. You set off at a light jog, pouch bouncing against your side. The road here is smooth, flanked by tamarisk trees and low, humming shrubs. Every so often, you catch faint wisps of other scents on the breeze, messages, lingering like ghosts of conversations. One is sharp with citrus. Another has the musky sweetness of jasmine and clove. Each one makes you feel like you're walking through an invisible dialogue. And suddenly, it all clicks. This wasn't just decoration or superstition. This was the ancient version of metadata. A scroll's scent told you where it was from, what it was about, who it was for, and how urgent it might be, all without unsealing the wax. That's not just clever, that's genius. When you reach the next station, the attendant takes one sniff of your pouch and nods. Northeast border, civil complaint, probably goats again. He waves you inside to rest. Apparently, you passed. You flop down under a fig tree, sweaty, proud, and mildly scented like basil. As the wind rustles the leaves above, you close your eyes and think, the postal couriers of ancient Persia weren't just riders. They were memory keepers, scent trackers, custodians of coded dreams. And your nose, it's finally starting to get it. By now, your nose could probably hold its own at a modern perfumery, or at least pass the entry-level test for a Persian postal apprenticeship circa 500 BCE. You smell like half the empire. Your dreams are starting to waft in sandalwood. And every time someone unwraps food, your brain scrambles to categorize it by fragrance hierarchy. You are, frankly, one more sniff away from becoming a walking spice rack. Today, you're traveling with a new courier, a wiry woman named Tame who rides like the wind and talks even faster. She's been part of the system for 12 years, since she was 15, and her saddlebags clink with sealed pouches. You can tell a lot about people by what they send, she says as you mount up, and even more by what they sent it with. The road ahead is smoother than expected, laid with hardened clay and scattered with straw to reduce dust clouds. Along the way, you pass a series of small mounds dotted with strange plants, mugwort, bergamot, and little bundles of lavender hung on wooden frames. Tame explains they're scent traps. Wind carries the messages' smells, and the frames catch them. helping identify if someone unauthorized has passed through, or even tampered with the air. You half laugh, then realize she's not joking, not even a little. Mainstream historical anchor, Persia's postal network. The Angarium wasn't just for delivery, it was also an intelligence web. Couriers weren't just messengers, they were observers. They noted troop movements, road conditions, political tensions, and yes, according to certain scholars, even the presence or absence of expected aromas was considered data. A missing scent could imply a stolen scroll. A scent too strong might suggest tampering. It's spycraft, by way of potpourri. Tame points to a small device strapped to her horse's saddle, a gourd with holes carved into it. Holding crushed bay leaves and orange peel, it emits a consistent, subtle fragrance. "This is my rider's mark," she says. When another courier smells it, they know it's me. It's like a signature. You're struck by the low-key genius of it. In a time before ID badges, usernames, or seen at 2:04 p.m., they had smell prints. You reach a fork in the road near a field of onions, an aromatic distraction if ever there was one, and take the left trail toward a rest station. But Tame suddenly reins in her horse. "Something's off," she murmurs, sniffing the air. You do the same. Among the scent of onion and saddle leather, there's a whiff of something wrong. Burned myrrh, slightly acrid, not part of this route's normal profile. Tame narrows her eyes. That's not supposed to be here. She dismounts, checks a nearby post where scent markers are usually burned. Sure enough, someone switched the signature blend. "What does that mean?" you ask, your voice low. She hesitates. Could mean a reroute, could mean sabotage. A heavy pause. You're standing in the middle of a historical thriller, and your only weapon is your sinuses. She decides to continue but takes a slower pace. You skirt the road, circling wide through a copse of dry trees. Soon, the station comes into view. Quiet. Too quiet. The air is stagnant. No telltale hints of cedar. No lavender burners. No sweet mint along the roof line. Inside, the place has been cleared out. Scrolls gone. Baskets overturned. No sign of struggle. Just absence. Quirky detail time. Some elite couriers, especially those trusted with military or royal missives, were trained to eat their scrolls in the event of ambush. No kidding. The parchment was specially treated to be digestible, though barely, and the scent oils made it taste like an herb garden soaked in candle wax. There are disputed accounts of couriers returning to base with indigestion, but mission success. Historians still argue whether this was standard practice or more of a myth spread to discourage thieves. Tame shakes her head, frowning. They cleared this fast. Someone knew. You find a single pouch tucked under a clay basin. You pick it up gently and inhale, clove, ash, and what might be rue. Tame nods slowly. Emergency reroute. That's the fallback signal. You ride hard for the next station. The message now personally in your hands, or rather, in your nostrils. Every breeze feels suspicious. Every tree like a lookout post. You've never been this hyper-aware of a smell trail in your life. Even back when you once tried to follow your neighbor's barbecue with nothing but your nose and desperation. At last, you reach the safety of the reroute station. This one's in full swing. 2 scribes sorting fresh dispatches. A cook stirring a pot of rice, thankfully not scented with any political meaning. And a stable hand rubbing frankincense oil into a saddle sore on a donkey. The smell is rich, medicinal, a bit overwhelming, but after the eerie quiet earlier, it's oddly comforting. Inside the command room, the lead administrator reads the scent signature and nods. You did well, he says to Tame. Someone's trying to reroute high-priority orders. Probably a local SA trap angry about tax enforcement. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't have to. You've seen enough scrolls, sniffed enough politics, to know how easily fragrant diplomacy can turn sour. Later, as you sit beneath a fig tree with Tame, watching the stars burn faintly overhead, She pulls out her blend pouch and lets you smell her newest mix: chamomile, pine, and saffron. New route, Northern Circuit. It smells like calm and frost and mountain mornings. You ask if she ever gets tired of riding, of carrying everyone's messages and secrets. She shrugs. Maybe, but someone's gotta be the lungs of the empire. You both sit in silence for a while, letting the fig tree's subtle sweetness wrap around you. You begin to understand that, for couriers like Tame, scent isn't just a job. It's a worldview, a whole empire built on breath and memory. Morning breaks not with the crow of a rooster, but with the gentle curl of lemongrass and lavender winding through your senses. You blink awake beneath the same fig tree, and for a moment, it's unclear if you're in a dream or a diffuser commercial. You stretch, rubbing the back of your neck, and realize Tame is already gone, off on the Northern Circuit with her pine saffron blend. Her silhouette fading into the morning mist like some mythological messenger ghost. At this point, you could go home. You've sniffed, ridden, rerouted, and decoded your way through enough scrolls to make your ancestors proud. But you're not done. There's one more destination, one more mystery hanging in the scented air. You're heading to Persepolis. Yes, that Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire. That glittering stone jewel built to show the world that Persia wasn't just powerful, it was perfumed perfection. And rumor has it, the palace didn't just house kings and feasts. It was also where the most sensitive messages were stored and occasionally manufactured. You hop onto a passing caravan, tucking yourself between sacks of pomegranates and copperware, and let the wheels carry you through the dry, sun-baked hills. The roads into Persepolis are cleaner, straighter, flanked by perfumed gardens, literally, lined with rows of marigolds, iris, and narcissus, which aren't just for show. Their purpose, olfactory disorientation. Anyone following an unsanctioned scent trail gets bombarded by 50 others. Take that, ancient spies. The city itself looms like a mirage: white stone, rising columns, golden doorways, and you immediately notice, it smells different. Less herbal, more exotic, like frankincense and lotus root mixed with polished stone and, is that citrus and honey? You pass through the gate of all nations. Eyes wide, nose twitching like a cartoon character following a pie scent. There are guards, yes, but more interestingly, burners, incense pots placed every 20 paces. Calibrated to mask or enhance particular smells depending on the time of day. Morning, rose and amber. Midday, saffron and cooling mint. Evening, a deep, velvety myrrh. Mainstream fact: Persepolis was designed not just for ceremony, but as a performance space for empire-wide diplomacy. Delegates from across the empire would arrive for Nowruz, the Persian New Year, bearing gifts, tributes, and scrolls. The postal system climaxed here. Messages funneled upward, decisions trickled back down, like a scented bureaucracy pyramid. But here's where things turn a little speculative. A court steward guides you into the hall of 100 columns, echoing. Monumental, absolutely not heated for comfort. The walls are etched with processions of people. Your guide explains that beneath this very floor, there are message vaults, a kind of pre-digital archive. Some historians believe the vaults didn't just store messages. They stored scented counterfeits, that is, decoy scrolls, prepared in case of a palace raid or internal sabotage. Some scholars laugh at this idea. Others, they've seen the scent-matching wax seals buried in jars beneath the city. You descend into one such vault, torch in hand. It's cooler here, and the air is still, so still. It feels like you stepped into a held breath. The shelves are carved into the walls, and on each rests a ceramic capsule sealed with wax. You uncap one cautiously. Inside, a cloth pouch, scented faintly with something rich and bitter. Tobacco? No, possibly labdanum. You press it to your nose. Instantly, you feel like you're being told a story, but in code. You can't read the script. You don't need to. The scent is trying to say, This is for important noses only. Quirky detail time. Some Persian elite were known to carry scent rings, signet rings that held a dab of scented resin in a compartment beneath the gemstone. They'd discreetly sniff the ring when anxious or when verifying message authenticity. You think it's ridiculous, until the court steward casually flips open his ring lid and dabs the resin on a scroll before sealing it. Security, he says, as if he's just enabled two-factor authentication. You follow the steward into a chamber that houses the Empire's scent codex. A logbook, basically, but instead of inked summaries, it contains recipe lists, meticulously written combinations of oils, herbs, and binding agents used for different classes of scrolls. Royal decree, rose plus cumin plus sandalwood. Provincial request, thyme plus mint plus clay. You run your finger down the page, marveling at how much of history has floated, unspoken, on air. Here's the scholarly tug of war, with these scents standardized across the empire. Or did each region maintain its own coding system? Some argue there was a top-down formula. Others insist local variation ruled. What's more, there's a growing theory, only whispered among archivists, that a secret scent code existed among the royal family. Something known only to a handful of scribes. A scroll carrying that scent would override all others, like an ancient cheat code. But no one's ever found such a recipe. It's either lost to time or so subtle that no one alive can distinguish it anymore. You're left alone in the codex room for a moment, and your curiosity gets the better of you. You open a small jar at the edge of the shelf, labeled only with a symbol, a lotus flower over a flame. Inside, a roll of cloth, stiff with age, smells unlike anything you've encountered yet. It's not floral, not spicy, almost metallic, like rain on stone, with the faintest echo of something herbal. It makes your head tingle. You quickly replace the lid. Later, you walk the stone terraces of Persepolis, dusk painting everything gold. You pass a wall of carved soldiers, each holding flowers, literal bundles of lilies, lotuses, and date palm fronds, not just for art. It was a message. We carry peace. But also, we know how to scent our weaponry. You sit at the top of a staircase overlooking the city, the air humming with incense, goat stew, and distant laughter. You close your eyes. Messages once moved through this empire like blood through veins, carried not just in ink and leather but in the very smell of life itself. And here you are, a tired, dusty, mildly dehydrated time traveler, nose full of history. You inhale deeply, and exhale even slower. This empire didn't just understand power. It fragranced it. The next morning greets you with a surprising twist, an invitation. Hand-delivered and perfumed, of course. The wax seal bears the insignia of the Royal Scent Archivist. That's a real job title. Apparently, you're expected at the temple quarter by noon. The note smells faintly of vetiver and fig, a combination used for internal administrative summons. Which you now recognize because yes, you've become that person. The walk takes you through Persepolis's quieter streets, lined with residential villas and perfumed water channels. That's right, aromatic engineering wasn't just for scrolls and ceremonies. Wealthy nobles had water fountains infused with fragrant oils. Some historians still argue whether this was done for spiritual reasons, for status flaunting, or simply because no one likes the smell of stagnant water. Either way, you pass a little boy chasing a perfumed paperfish down one of these canals. He laughs, but you can't help sniffing the air like a paranoid bloodhound. You arrive at a domed structure tucked behind the Hall of Records. It looks modest until the door opens and a wall of scent hits you: cardamom, incense resin, old papyrus, and something vaguely electrical, like the way the air smells before a summer storm. Inside, the archivist is already busy with scrolls spread across a table, each marked with a string and a small clay tag. She motions you closer. You've made quite the aromatic journey, she says, her voice low, like someone who speaks more in libraries than in streets. She hands you a scroll. It's sealed, tied, standard stuff, but when she cracks it open, the scent that rises isn't one of the known codes. It's cinnamon, yes, but also cedar bark and beeswax. That, she says, is a private message from a queen to her sister. No political agenda, no military plans, just gossip and honey recipes. You raise an eyebrow. She nods. Even personal letters had scent. Why? Because the scent told the receiver it was safe to relax. That it wasn't a royal decree or a summons. It was comfort, encoded. Mainstream anchor. Evidence from clay tablets and Achaemenid administrative records suggests that women in the royal court often maintained separate private communication networks, some using female-only couriers. These messages didn't just carry information. They conveyed tone and intention through scent, particularly floral and culinary combinations. Now for the quirky bit. One scroll is sealed with cake. Or at least something smelling like cake. Burned honey, almond flour, and a smidge of rose water. That's from the cook at the royal nursery. The archivist says with a smile. She scented her shopping requests, so the palace stewards wouldn't confuse them with routine orders. Imagine asking for 2 kilos of figs and ending up with sword polish. You begin to realize just how deeply embedded perfume was in every layer of life, language, love, bureaucracy, dinner. It wasn't just communication, it was subtext. A scroll that smelled of clove meant urgency. A whiff of fennel meant a favor, gently asked. And rose was layered, complicated, depending on context. It could mean joy, sorrow, flirtation, or warning. Rose was the emoji of the ancient world. You look around and see rows upon rows of clay pots, tightly sealed, duplicates, she explains. For training, if a courier got promoted to royal duty, they had to learn all 27 scent codes. In order and combination. There were drills. They failed more than passed. You try your hand at one of the tests. The archivist offers a small cloth pouch. Unlabeled. You take a whiff and close your eyes. It's sharp, herbal, something sour at the edge. Coriander? You ask tentatively. She nods. And? You dig deep, nose first. Mint. And lime peel. She grins. Good, that's reimbursement delayed. Used for tax scrolls. It let local treasurers know not to panic yet. The scent games continue. One blend smells of crushed petals and goat hair. Turns out, that meant livestock relocation, a reminder that the ancient world didn't shy away from realism. Another smells like leather and pine tar. Military recruitment. But one jar stops you cold. You open it and instantly regret it. It's pungent, cloying, almost needy, like someone melted a fruitcake over a fire pit, then dumped in lavender just to confuse you. The archivist says softly, that was the blend used in the weeks before Persepolis was sacked. You pause. You remember the story, how Alexander the Great burned the city. Either in drunken vengeance or calculated propaganda, depending on which historian you ask. But this smell. It was the last scent signature ever recorded, she says. A panicked mix. Multiple couriers were reporting in from different provinces, smells overlapping, codes clashing. It smelled like fear. This is the open debate. Was the destruction of Persepolis a targeted move to erase a cultural power center? Or just a chaotic mistake fueled by wine and bad decisions? Some suggest that Alexander kept a few scent codices. Others think he tried to recreate the system in his own administration. Unsuccessfully, but no one knows for sure. You cap the jar and breathe through your sleeve. Even centuries later, the residue of fear is a little too real. Later, you're allowed to walk through the archivist's private garden, a rooftop terrace with rows of rare herbs, spikenard, galbanum, orris root. This is where she cultivates original recipes. She lets you clip a few leaves, crush them in your palm. The mix is earthy and green, almost hopeful. Before paper, she says. Before ink, there was scent. It told people what couldn't be said aloud. Who to trust, when to wait, when to run. You sit beneath a sun-warmed trellis of jasmine vines and realize that while the scrolls and walls and wax seals may have crumbled, the idea, still lingers. That meaning can travel invisibly. That intention, if carried carefully enough, has a scent all its own. A soft breeze carries a new aroma, cinnamon, dust, and figs. It smells like memory. You lean back and let the garden hum around you, grateful that you followed the trail this far. Even if you don't remember all the herbs by name, your nose does, and it's storing them somewhere between curiosity and sleep. You wake to the low rumble of thunder, not from the sky, but from below. It's drums, funeral drums, rhythmic, measured, echoing through the alleyways of Persepolis like the heartbeat of a memory. You sit up in the archivist's garden, disoriented, fig leaves in your hair, a faint trace of mint still on your fingers. The air is heavy today, not with storm clouds, but with sorrow. Today marks the anniversary of King Darius I's death, and the city is observing it with a mix of reverence and ritual. You join the quiet procession winding through the temple precinct, everyone dressed in neutral linens, each person carrying a small sachet tied with black thread. Yours is handed to you by a solemn priest. Inside, crushed myrtle, date ash, and dried citrus peel. You raise it to your nose. It smells thoughtful, like the kind of quiet sadness that doesn't ask to be fixed. You follow the others into a domed sanctuary where they burn these sachets in long, low braziers. Smoke rises in gentle spirals, curling toward vents in the ceiling, disappearing like whispered stories. This is not mourning as you know it. This is scent as remembrance. And here's a mainstream historical anchor for you. Persians practiced elaborate funerary rites, often involving perfumes and aromatic oils. Embalming wasn't their focus, preserving the memory of the dead was. Through smell. But here comes the twist. The archivist, now wearing a dark sash and less of a smile, leans in and murmurs, "This is also the day they test the hidden messages." You blink. What messages? She gestures toward the braziers. Some sachets are encoded. Messages to the afterlife. Warnings. Even secrets. Some believe the smoke carries them upward. Others say the scrolls hidden in the ash are retrieved later, decoded by monks trained in scent symbology. You'd laugh, but she's not joking. In fact, she points to a group of boys sorting ashes with metal picks and clay dishes. They scrape, sniff, and sometimes nod quietly. You watch as one of them uncovers a fragment of papyrus, its edges singed, its scent barely clinging on, sandalwood and turmeric. The boy holds it up, and someone from the shadows steps forward to take it. You suddenly feel like you're in the middle of an espionage film where no one uses words. Quirky. Oh yes, the Persians believed the dead retained a form of presence, especially the honored dead, and some historians believe these rituals were occasionally hijacked for covert messaging. Think of it as encryption via smoke signal. Was this common? Historians still debate whether the fire rituals were strictly spiritual or if certain sects used them for clandestine operations. After all, nothing disappears faster than a scroll burned to ash, unless that ash has meaning. Later, as the procession ends and the city returns to normal, you wander toward the outskirts, where old messenger stables once stood. The buildings are long crumbled, but the earth still holds scent. Literally, you kick at the dirt and smell fennel. A little further, marjoram. These were scent markers, planted around departure points to condition the courier animals. Not just humans were trained in smell. The horses and mules, they were scent literate. A mule who knew rosemary meant go north was far less likely to get lost. You imagine being one of those riders, days on the road. Scrolls tucked in your tunic, nose attuned to every breeze, every unfamiliar whiff a potential warning. A messenger statue stands nearby, partially ruined, but you can still see the carving of a scroll tied with a cord. And something beneath it, a cluster of herbs. Faded. You think it might be time. You lean in, nose first, because of course you do. Still there, faint, but undeniable. Later, you're invited to a supper held by retired scribes, sort of a reunion for those who once handled messages for the royal court. They gather on a rooftop under soft lanterns, passing around bowls of lentils and grilled eggplant. The smell is divine, and not just because you're hungry. One scribe, older than the building, shows you his old toolkit. Not pens, not ink, but a series of carved scent stamps. We didn't always use oils. He croaks. Sometimes. The parchment itself was pressed against scented tiles. Dry coding, we called it. Subtle. Didn't stain the scroll, only the trained nose would know. He presses one into your palm. It's shaped like a leaf. The texture sharp and clean. You sniff, anise and clay. What did that mean? He grins. That I was in love with the baker's daughter. She never found out. And just like that, you remember that the postal system wasn't just about war or power or kings. It was also about humans being hopelessly, gloriously human. Love letters, apologies, inside jokes, threats written in cinnamon. They clink their clay cups together, a toast to the ones still sniffing. You sit back, stuffed, a little buzzed on spiced wine, and watch the stars inch across the sky. The archivist joins you, holding a piece of cloth she hands over carefully. You unfold it. Inside, a scent recipe written in the old tongue. You recognize two of the symbols, rose and cedar. What's this? It's a blend lost to time, she says, or nearly. We've pieced it together from temple archives and descriptions in poetry. We think it was used for peace treaties. Only twice in history. You press it to your nose. And it smells like still water. Like held breath. Like the exact moment before something becomes memory. You drift through the quiet streets of Persepolis like a feather caught in a breeze. The night air is cooler now, filled with the scent of dust and distant sandalwood. A low fog creeps in from the irrigation canals, curling around your ankles like a stray cat. The city feels half asleep, and so do you. But your nose is wide awake. The archivist had mentioned something called the Midnight Labyrinth, a part of the old courier training route now closed off to most. Naturally, you're on your way there. Because of course, when ancient Persia throws a scent-based obstacle course at you, you say yes. The entrance is hidden behind a storage compound, camouflaged by a wall of drying dates and baskets of saffron. A narrow stairway descends into darkness. The air turns damp, then aromatic. Layers of scent start stacking: crushed basil, smoke, lavender, something that smells a bit like rain-soaked parchment. At the first turn, you encounter your first challenge: 3 unmarked jars. Only one leads you in the right direction. The others trigger, not traps. Exactly, but embarrassing outcomes. You pick the middle jar, lift the lid, and sniff. It smells like warm citrus and honey. That's hospitality, you whisper, remembering the archivist's lessons. You turn right. A chime sounds from somewhere above. Correct. The labyrinth goes on. Each junction asks a question with scent. One fork reeks of vinegar and mint, an old symbol for debt collection. The other smells like myrrh and beeswax, associated with religious offerings. You take the sacred path, which seems safer than whatever vinegar leads to. Probably an invoice. Mainstream history time. Archaeological notes and training records from the Achaemenid Empire mention a testing system for elite couriers. Often done in the dark or under sensory duress. Smell-based decision-making wasn't just about memory. It was about reflex, instinct, especially under stress. One false turn could send a message into enemy hands, or a royal request into a goat pen. Quirky tidbit incoming. Some versions of the labyrinth included scented decoys, jars that smelled like food but meant danger. One researcher found residue of garlic and cumin in a clay pot, labeled with a warning symbol. Why? Because soldiers often baited fake scrolls with food smells, hoping enemy spies would steal them. Gourmet espionage. Back to the maze. At the next corridor, the scent becomes humid, floral, jasmine, maybe, or ylang ylang. You press forward and find a tiny alcove. Inside, a mural is etched on the stone wall. It shows two riders exchanging scrolls beneath a crescent moon. Their noses are exaggerated, comically large, almost cartoonish. You stifle a laugh. Even ancient Persians loved a bit of visual sarcasm. You sit on a nearby bench. Just for a second, just to rest, but your eyes drift shut. Only for a blink that lasts, who knows how long. You're jolted awake by a new smell, musk, smoke, something sharp and metallic. You're not alone. A figure sits across from you, draped in gray, face hidden in shadow, not threatening, just watching. They hold out a piece of cloth. You take it. It's soaked with a scent that makes you dizzy, leather, salt, and dried citrus. Familiar, yet not, like a memory you forgot to have. The figure speaks, voice low. This was the scent used when the empire fell. You blink. You mean when Alexander? They nod. After the fires, the survivors used this blend to mark safe zones. Ruins where no soldiers lingered. Places where it was safe to speak, to mourn, to plan. The scent becomes more vivid as they describe it. You picture old temples turned into makeshift shelters. Perfumed rags waving from broken archways, signaling safety. People moving silently, following trails of scent through rubble. Open scholarly debate time. Some argue these survival scents are myths, later romanticized into legend. Others believe remnants found in collapsed chambers confirm their use. The real debate, whether these blends were preemptively made, suggesting they anticipated their own downfall, or created after. Out of desperation. The figure disappears before you can ask. The cloth remains. You tuck it into your sleeve and push on through the labyrinth. The next hallway opens into a cavernous room, lit by glowing coals. A scent altar dominates the space, dozens of ceramic dishes, each containing a different blend. A challenge. The archivist mentioned this, the final board. Your task, match 10 scent codes to their message intent. Smell, decide, place a symbol tile. It's harder than it sounds when your nose is overloaded. You kneel and begin. First dish, cinnamon and pine tar. You recall it from earlier. That's military deployment. Second, clove, honey, rose, personal letter, a romantic one, if the honey ratio is strong. Third, sage and ash. Oh, that's a political warning, or a diplomatic caution. The ambiguity is part of the test. Time blurs. Your fingers grow sticky with oils and dust. By the 10th bowl, your brain is doing scent algebra. But somehow, it works. A soft chime. The floor beneath you shifts slightly, revealing a spiral staircase upward. You climb, half awake, heart hammering, nose twitching. You emerge into open air, onto a rooftop you don't recognize. The city lies below, glittering under moonlight, sleepy and slow. Beside you, a lantern clicks on. It's the archivist. Took you long enough, she says, handing you a piece of flatbread wrapped in thyme leaves. You take it gratefully, chew slowly, stare at the skyline. Why the labyrinth? You ask. To test the real skill. She replies, anyone can learn a scent. Few can follow it when they're tired, lost, afraid. You nod. She sits beside you. You did well, she adds, then leans back. But don't think that makes you a master courier. Those had to do it blindfolded, on horseback, with enemy scouts behind them. You groan, "I barely survived with snacks." She laughs, a soft, warm sound. In the quiet that follows, you realize how much scent has shaped your understanding of this place. Not just of the Empire's messages and systems, but of the people behind them, the lovers, the liars, the mothers sending recipes sealed with cinnamon. You breathe deep, basil, thyme, firewood, old ink, and jasmine. Everything the wind chooses to remember. You wake with a soft start. Still on that rooftop, the sun is stretching over the hills now, bleeding warm gold across the tiled skyline of Persepolis. Birds chirp somewhere in the distance, sounding far too enthusiastic for this hour. You roll onto your side, the scent of last night's thyme flatbreads still lingering on your fingers. The archivist is gone, but a fresh cup of something steaming sits near your head, saffron tea with a hint of dried lime. You sip, you sigh. You are beginning to suspect that ancient Persia wants to seduce you with breakfast. Down below, the streets are yawning to life. Market stalls open with the creak of wooden carts. Children dart between bread sellers. And a breeze wafts the first tang of sheep cheese and sun-warmed melon up to your perch. But today, your guide is not the archivist. It's a boy, no older than 10. He appears beside you without a sound. Barefoot, holding a bundle of cloth tied with blue string. "You're late," he says, with an air of excessive authority only 10-year-olds possess. "The master blender is waiting." Of course she is. You follow the boy through winding alleys until you reach a tall, round building that smells like, well, everything. It hits you in waves: cinnamon, garlic, rose petals, ash, mint, even something that smells suspiciously like sheep sweat. Inside, the ceiling curves high and dark like an overturned bowl. Clay shelves line the walls, each one crowded with tiny jars, bundles of dried herbs, blocks of resin, and wax-sealed scrolls. The master blender is a small woman with steel gray hair and arms like woven rope. She's arranging a series of scent blends for testing. "You're the one from the labyrinth," she says, without looking up. "Didn't fall asleep in the ashroom, did you?" You shake your head. She smirks. "Good, then you're ready for the real work." Mainstream historical moment. It's well documented that the Persians developed intricate perfume blends not just for personal use, but for statecraft, royal audiences, diplomatic visits, legal agreements. All carried their own scent signatures. The blending process was a guarded profession, often taught through family guilds or temple apprenticeships. Quirky tidbit: one preserved scroll from the city of Susa includes what appears to be a fragrance blend designed specifically to make its bearer seem more trustworthy during negotiations. It involved crushed fig bark, lime zest, and goat milk powder. Did it work? Depends who you ask. Now, back in the blending room, the master places 5 vials in front of you. Each of these, she says, was used to mark a different type of message. Your task is to recreate a 6th, the scent of retraction. You blink, like taking a message back. Exactly. When mistakes were made, or when alliances shifted, a courier would sometimes be sent not with a new message, but with a scent that signaled ignore the last one. You suppress a laugh, like hitting unsend on a scroll. She snorts, only riskier. You spend the next hour blending and testing. Your fingers turn sticky, your nose confused. You learn that too much cardamom implies aggression. Too little lime means insincerity. A single drop of frankincense. Instant credibility boost. Who knew? Finally, you produce a blend the master nods at without immediate disdain. Close enough, she says. You'd survive 3 out of 5 negotiations with this. You take that as a glowing endorsement. Historians still debate, she continues, whether retraction blends were used officially or informally. Some believe they were emergency tools used by elite envoys. Others think it's a myth, something invented by later scribes to explain contradictory scrolls found in different regions. She hands you a scroll, sealed with violet wax and a dab of the retraction blend you made. Take this to the old gate, she instructs. Give it to the gatekeeper. And don't sniff the walls. That feels like suspiciously specific advice. As you make your way through the city, the sun climbs higher and the smells intensify. You pass a soapmaker's stall, where bricks of lavender and clay are drying in rows. The breeze picks up a gust of roasted chickpeas and burnt dates from a food vendor's brazier. You begin to notice how much of the city's rhythm is governed by scent, where the bakery starts its dough, when the tanner opens his vats, how the perfumers mark the hours not by sun but by scent sequence. Near the old gate, the stones in the wall start to shimmer oddly. You lean in, the scent of fennel hits first, followed by something stranger, oily, spicy, almost peppery. You remember the master blender's warning and instinctively step back. Too late, your eyes water, your nose burns. You sneeze, violently, twice. A voice behind you chuckles. Gate trap, says the gatekeeper, an older man with a nose that could anchor a ship. Keeps nosy foreigners from climbing the walls. Literally. He takes the scroll from you and cracks the seal. The scent escapes, rosewood, lime, a little bergamot. He nods. Message cancelled, he says, folding the scroll without reading it. You blink. You're not going to. No need, he shrugs. The scent says everything. You marvel again at how much trust this culture placed in scent. In a time with no carbon copies, no digital receipts, the Persians managed to build a messaging system so robust and nuanced that smell could override words. He waves you through the gate, and as you pass, you spot a side room filled with little clay tokens. The gatekeeper explains they're scent samplers used by couriers to test blends mid-journey. Like olfactory checkpoints. Each token is marked for weather. He adds, some smells vanish in heat, others bloom. You had to recalibrate constantly. And that's the point, isn't it? Persian couriers weren't just runners or riders. They were chemists, analysts, even diplomats. They had to read the wind, the mood of a village, the intensity of scent under moonlight. You sit down near the gate, watching the road stretch beyond. Traders pass on camelback, children chase goats, a woman balances a jar of orange blossom water on her head without spilling a drop. And still, the city hums, not with noise, but with layers of scent you've only just begun to decode. You breathe deep. Somewhere behind you, the master blender opens a new vial. Somewhere ahead, another courier picks up a scroll. The story moves on, silent and scented, message after message riding the breeze. You leave the old gate with your head spinning slightly, either from scent fatigue or from the deeply humbling realization that in ancient Persia, even the air had better communication skills than most group chats. The road out of the city dips gently through a valley carpeted with early spring grass. Here, the scents mellow, wild thyme, sun-warmed dust, a trickle of river water, metallic and clean. Your guide today is a horse, a shaggy, dun-colored creature named Shirak who smells like hay and stubbornness. He snorts when you try to mount and flicks his ears like he's rating your posture. 2 stars. You mutter, no tip. The archivist told you this leg of the journey would reveal the final, most secretive layer of the courier system, the riders who vanish. It sounds dramatic, and probably was. These were the elite messengers, trained not only in speed and scent, but in misdirection. Their job, deliver messages so sensitive, even the receiving party didn't know they were coming until the scent confirmed it. Mainstream historical note: there are records, mostly from enemy sources, of Persian riders who left no trail. Some scholars attribute this to camouflage techniques, knowledge of terrain, or simply the empire's investment in infrastructure. Others suggest the use of decoy scents, using specific blends to throw off pursuers or mask their own odor entirely. Your path takes you through a cedar forest. The air thickens again, resinous and clean. You pause beside a creek, where a stone marker is embedded with strange symbols. You lean down to sniff: cedar oil, amber, and something floral, a path marker, disguised as a scent capsule. According to fringe theory, elite couriers use these to communicate silently with allies. Scent markers could mean safe house nearby, or ambush ahead. Some even functioned like timestamps. Certain blends changed smell after a few days, allowing allies to know how recently the path had been traveled. You press forward. The trail narrows and then opens into a clearing where a strange structure rises from the ground, part shelter, part shrine. You dismount. The door is unlocked. Inside, the walls are lined with scroll holders, most empty, but a few still sealed. On a central pedestal sits a small urn. You lift the lid. The scent that escapes is indescribable, a blend of everything you've encountered: smoke, clove, lime, sweat, ink, rose, leather. It smells like the road, like dust and secrets, like speed, like memory itself. You sit beside the urn. On the wall is a carved phrase, written in Old Persian script but phonetically clear: the nose remembers what the eyes forget. That lands with you harder than expected. Your mind drifts to modern times. We talk of scent memories. Yes, your grandma's soup, the bookstore with wood floors, the ex who wore too much cologne, but you never imagined a civilization so dedicated to encoding meaning in fragrance. There's even debate. Historians still argue about whether some of these ancient scents had narcotic or psychoactive properties. Did they affect the emotional tone of the message? Could a courier deliver not just news, but a mood? One theory suggests that war declarations were accompanied by bitter, adrenaline-spiking scents: wormwood, charred wood, black pepper. Peace offerings, meanwhile, might include calming blends: lavender, cinnamon, and milk powder, a kind of emotional framing device. Centuries before PowerPoint. As the light in the clearing dims, you notice a second urn tucked behind the pedestal. This one is marked with a red wax seal. You crack it open carefully. Inside is a simple scent: crushed mint and dried rose petals. Comforting, familiar, the kind of blend someone might leave as a final message, not of urgency, but of farewell. Attached is a scrap of parchment, brittle and sun-bleached. The ink is nearly gone, but one word remains: forgiven. You sit in stillness for a while. No need to interpret, no big twist, just a human moment, passed through time via scent. When you finally emerge from the shelter, the sun is folding behind the hills. Chirac, somehow, has moved into the shade and is nibbling grass like a retiree in a beach chair. The archivist appears once more, holding a bag of dried apricots. "Come on," she says. "Sun's down, and you've got one last place to see." You mount up and ride with her in companionable silence. The air cools further. Night birds stir in the trees. You feel the weight of your journey, not physically, but in your nose. You're carrying the layers of every room, every scroll, every ceremonial puff of cedar. It's like scent has become your new language. Eventually, you arrive at what looks like a crumbling fortress, but inside, torchlight reveals something more elegant: rows of bronze perfume diffusers, labeled with ancient courier routes. It's the scent map. Each diffuser still works. You press the switch, and a warm current carries a burst of fragrance, different for each location. The route from Babylon to Susa smells like dates and oiled parchment. From Ecbatana to Sardis, leather and pine sap. Persepolis to Pasargadae, smoked myrtle, cardamom, a hint of rosewater. Each route was its own scented experience, its own identity. Couriers memorized them not by map, but by scent. They could follow their nose across 1.50 miles and know precisely where they were. Quirky tidbit: one recovered letter from a Persian courier school included scent-based mnemonics. Students were told to imagine a scented donkey, each section of the donkey associated with a particular aroma and route. The left ear, mint for the northern highlands. The tail, musty incense for the southern ports. You can't make this stuff up. Well, actually, someone probably did, but it worked. You run your hand across the old diffuser panels. And one bursts with a smell you can't quite place. Not sweet, not bitter, just known. It smells like Journey's End. The archivist turns to you. Quieter now. These scents, she says, were the real message. The scrolls just gave context. You nod. She hands you a final vial, unlabeled. This one's for you, she says, for whatever path you choose next. You pocket it, and something in your chest settles. Not like closure, but like a window cracked just enough to let the cool night in. As you ride back under the stars, Chirac humming beneath you and the road still warm from sun, you realize how strange it will be to return to a world where messages come with emojis instead of myrrh. But hey, at least your inbox never smelled like goat milk and burnt fig bark. Progress. You wake up somewhere familiar, but different. The rooftops of Persepolis now stretch out in a hush, cloaked in that magical, inky hue just before full night. The wind has changed, softer, less perfumed. The city breathes slower now. There's a pillow beneath your head. When did that get there? And someone's left a tiny bowl of candied melon chips at your side. You nibble one. It tastes like honey and nostalgia. The archivist returns, now dressed in a light cotton shawl that smells faintly of saffron and olive soap. She doesn't say anything, just hands you a papyrus scroll wrapped in silk and gestures toward a narrow stairwell leading up to a tower that, moments ago, definitely didn't exist. You climb, slowly. The steps are cool and warm, spiraling upward like a snail shell. Each step seems to carry a scent. Step 1. Clove. Step 2. Lavender. Step 3. The unmistakable zip of citrus peel. It's a scent staircase, a memory ladder. By the time you reach the top, you're dizzy with associations, and then, the view. Oh. The entire Persian courier route, or at least a shimmering dream of it, stretches before you like a map made from candlelight. You see the old stations. The desert stretches, the ghost of Chirac ambling somewhere in the distance, his tail flicking lazily. The cities rise and fall like whispers. Each place you visited breathes softly through the air, sandalwood from the fortress, mint from the stream markers, a confusing whiff of goat milk. You try not to hold a grudge. The scroll in your hand begins to warm. It's not magic, it's science, some ancient Persian innovation involving scent-activated ink. Historians still argue about the actual mechanism. Some say it was oils reacting to body heat. Others think the scrolls contained layers of reactive material that triggered scent or text changes after certain time intervals. Honestly, no one's completely cracked it yet. But this one works. As you slowly unroll it, you catch notes of bergamot, charcoal, and something like sage smoke after rain. The writing reveals itself in elegant curls. If you have come this far, you already know. The scent was always the message. A shiver tiptoes down your spine. Below the message, a curious signature, a nose. Not a drawing of one, a literal wax impression. You try not to think about whose it was. The archivist appears again, this time holding a thin bronze rod with a tiny sponge at the tip. She dips it into a clay jar, dabs the scroll, and nods. A moment later, the writing vanishes. Self-deleting message, she murmurs. High-level diplomacy, they use this on assassination orders, by the way. You swallow. I'm joking, she adds. You're not sure she is. Quirky detail. Some elite couriers were trained in rudimentary ventriloquism. Yes, you heard that right. The idea was that if a courier were ever captured and interrogated, they could confuse their captors by mimicking different accents or speaking as if they were merely a scent porter, with no knowledge of the actual message. Whether this worked in practice or just amused the court during training drills, well, historians still debate that one too. Now, you and the archivist sit in silence for a long while, watching the final trails of incense rise from temple rooftops below. Somewhere in the market, a vendor is still open, roasting honeyed almonds over coals. You can smell it. So, she asks finally, what did you learn? You think for a moment. About messages, about memory, about the strange fragility of scent, how it can vanish in an instant or linger for decades. About the fact that the Persian Empire, despite all its military might and monumental architecture, chose to encode some of its most sensitive information not in iron or marble, but in air. You learned that something ephemeral can still hold weight, that invisibility isn't always weakness, and that if you want someone to remember you, don't send a postcard. Send a smell. You stand up. She hands you a small cloth sachet. Take this, she says. It'll remind you of the journey. You sniff it, frankincense, a hint of ink, and something unmistakably you. Somehow, in this wild night ride through time, they captured your scent, too. The archivist tips her head, and in a blink, she's gone. No footsteps, no puff of smoke, just the lingering whisper of myrrh. You descend the tower slowly. Each step releases a scent again, but now they smell like memory, not just the thing itself, but your time with it, the bread, the firelight, the oddly emotional donkey mnemonic. You're almost back at the start. And now, it's time to bring you home. Your journey fades now, like mist rising from a warmed rooftop after rain. The scents are softer, less like signals, more like lullabies. The sharpness of cedar becomes the mellow hush of woodsmoke. The rose that once marked a diplomatic plea now simply cradles the edges of your breath. There is nothing left to deliver. No scrolls, no coded blends, only rest. Let your mind soften its grip. Let the scented threads of the journey dissolve gently. You are no longer the courier. You are the message, a quiet presence, drifting through space and memory, unbound by parchment or seal. The stars overhead flicker like ancient torches, markers of roads long forgotten but not lost. The wind through the trees hums like an old friend, a sound you've always known but only now remember. Every breath now feels like a whisper from that world. Faint traces of lime, perhaps, a flicker of cardamom, or nothing at all, just the hush of something once held dearly. And it's enough. Your limbs grow heavy, not tired, just perfectly weighted, like a scroll tucked back into its shelf after a long, important journey. Let the day disappear behind you, its edges rounded off like candle wax. No more secrets, no more messages. Just the quiet hush of sleep. And maybe, if you dream deep enough, you'll catch a whisper of ancient cedar on the breeze.